similar question to what I asked initially, what comes to your mind when you hear strategy consulting? This one, it's a bit more complicated because data science is a very huge term in engineering colleges. Consulting wasn't, at least from like when I was sort of looking into it, I hadn't heard of it, right? I had to do some research on it. So that's, when I did my first 1 or 2 data science internships, that's when this whole consulting concept popped up in my campus with this idea of share leadership program. I don't know if your colleges have that, but it's like a widespread network of colleges, and essentially they teach you consulting for free if you make it through their selection process. So I applied for that, and that was my introduction to consulting. And if any of you are familiar, you're going to be having heard of a lot of these terms, right? You must have heard of M&A and fundraising and whatnot. So consulting, again, much like data science, it's a very complex domain. You don't really have one right place to start, one wrong place to start. When it comes to consulting, the main idea in all of these essentially is solving problems. Businesses hire consultants so that they come in and that they solve their shit. That's what consultants do, to put it simply, and they charge a hell lot of money for it. So, how exactly do they solve these problems? I'm going to sort of walk you through a consultant's approach to any problem, and that's what's applied in all of these big firms, McKinsey, BCG, Bain, whatnot. Once I walk you through the process, I'm going to explain you why these consultants are paid so much. Because if any of you are not familiar with consulting or anything, just do a quick Google search of on how much consultants are paid. You're going to be shocked. Uh, they paid a hell lot of money. Obviously, they work a lot for it. Yeah, hopefully, again, by showing you this whole pyramid, hopefully you have some sort of understanding of how exactly to approach a consulting project. How do they solve these problems? They do it by using a lot of fancy terms. So, consulting is one such field that you're going to realize, once you sort of start learning things, that it's going to have a lot of fancy terms, very fancy terms. But then you look at the definition of those terms and you're going to think, what the hell? Because it's something very basic, but they sell it in such a great way that it appears really fancy and sophisticated. And I would say that's what a large part of consulting is. It's selling. It's selling yourself as intellectually superior to the person who's hiring you, that they need your help. And that's how you become a great consultant. You become a great consultant when you have the ability to convince the other person that they need your help. They want to die without your help. I'm going to just start with the typical approach to a problem. So let's say you have a very simple problem statement that my restaurant is not profitable. Right? You have you're working towards this restaurant. You're working for this restaurant, and he comes to you. You're a McKinsey consultant. He's going to come and tell you my restaurant is not profitable. Now you're going to probably say that's very vague, right? I mean, uh, your restaurant is not profitable. Where do we start with that? And that's the thing. अगर उन्हें पता होता है, if they knew why the restaurant is not profitable, they wouldn't have come to you, right? If they knew why the restaurant is suffering, they would have solved the problem themselves. So that's where consultants come in. They help solve the problems that the business people are not able to solve. So one way of sort of doing this is that they take the problem and they break it down into smaller sub problems. This figure that you have in front of you is what is called an issue tree. Because what you're doing here is you have a main issue and you're breaking it down into smaller issues, right? So this is the issue tree. You can see you started from something very vague, like my restaurant is not profitable, and now at the bottom you have a list of different possible causes behind it, right? It could be because you know you need to fire some workers. Maybe that'll help solve the problem, or maybe you need to change the cuisine. That's going to solve the problem, etc., etc. So one thing you will notice when you look at this issue tree is that all of these suggestions, they're, I mean, for starters, they're pretty much all you can think of. Like I personally cannot think of any other suggestions that aren't covered in these suggestions, right? If you can, that's great. Good going. You'll make a good consultant. But yeah, so it's pretty much, I would say, exhaustive. And you can also observe that these suggestions are pretty much unique. They're different to each other, right? So when you have something like changing the cuisine, that's very different from something like shifting to a less spicy neighborhood. So you have MISI here. What is MISI? Fancy term. Mutually exclusive, completely exhaustive. So mutually exclusive means that all of these different things, they're all exclusive. They're different from each other. Completely exhaustive means that this whole issue tree, it spans the whole thing. Like this is the list of possible things that could be the cause behind the problem. So this is the first step. Any consulting problem you want to get, you want to try breaking it down to smaller problems that you can actually do something with. Because just restaurants not making profits, that's not really something you can do a lot with, right? So you break it down to smaller problems. Then moving on, when I say breaking it into smaller problems, it's not as simple as just increasing revenue and lowering costs. Although sometimes it is as simple as that. And then I would say this meme is still very unrealistic because there should be at least two or three more zeros in the bill. But yeah, this is pretty much it. So you have that. Next, you have something called hypothesis and analysis. So I'm going to sort of give you an example. I'm going to walk you through the whole thing here. So let's say you have the issue that does India have enough resources to make a graphene-based battery? It's a very general question, right? What's resources? So you can break down resources, right? Resources could be the natural materials required, there could be the industries required, etc., etc. So let's focus on one specific resource. Let us look at, do we have enough qualified engineers to make these batteries? Because obviously it's not something that anyone can make, right? These are very specialized batteries. So that's one smaller sub issue. Next, you have something called an hypothesis. Hypothesis, in simple terms, is tukka, or the English version of it, guesswork. So this is where you sort of want to make a guess, right? Without knowing anything, you want to guess. Yeah, I mean, India has a lot of universities, a lot of institutions, and there's some very high quality of engineers here, right? And you want to say that on the basis of whatever you know, right? Like let's say I study in matlab, bits and I see some good quality engineers around me, so I'm going to maybe make that claim, but that's not going to be the claim coming from somebody else. So that's again going to be dependent on your perspective, but that's the thing, it can be wrong, you can be wrong, the hypothesis can be wrong. It's just going to give you a starting point. You now have some direction. Ki you said ki yeah, you want to have enough qualified engineers because you have enough qualified institutions. So next you have analysis. Now you need to prove or disprove your tukka, right? So this is where you're going to look at data and you're going to see India की university ranking क्या है respect to the world, etc., etc.